G'day folks, thanks for having me, and congratulations and thank you to all the organisers of World Environment Day. Another amazing job done, and really awesome work and by an amazing group of volunteers. So I'm Ahri, I've been coordinating DDEC for the past 2.5 years, working with our awesome committee, volunteers and community, and but I'm stepping away from the script a little today to talk about personal reflections around democracy and the environment and the political situation and context that we're in. But DDEC, we've been continuing to work on tree protections, best practice planning and regulation for renewable energy, and now working on setting up a Toowoomba region tree planting group, land care group, if you will. So all of this is about obviously how we move to a culture of stewardship. Earth stewardship culture rather than subdued culture. And I went to church the other day, and there was part of the scripture that was read that for instructions for humans on earth that used the word subdue in terms of how humans are supposed to relate to the earth. And I think all humans and all words are subject to error and folly. And I believe the deepest wisdom of God and cannot be written or spoken. And so to me, this word subdue is kind of like the parents giving the keys to the car to the kids, telling them that they want the kids to go and dominate and subdue the car, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. I think stewardship is what we need. And so the question we've got to ask ourselves in this very complicated, fast-moving world that we're in, how do we move to a stewardship culture where there's increasingly more fear over hope, reactivity over consideration, judgment over curiosity, competition over cooperation, and hate pushing love to the edges. And we've seen a lot of changes in the last 15 years, and some of the most poignant things locally that I've noticed that really have made me feel the grip of how quickly things are changing is the story of a Yazidi man sitting in a park in town, and a young man came up to him and asked him if he spoke English, and he said no because he'd only just arrived, and he got punched in the head. And there's another lady who's one of our volunteers, and she's from an Asian country. She's over here, her husband's got working over here, and she's already experienced discrimination multiple times and is fearful to go out, and she's only been here 6 months. So let's be clear, we're in a context of an increasingly rapid societal disruption, polarisation and democratic breakdown, where there's a current political evaporation of any bipartisan mainstream consensus on environmental action, let alone other issues around immigration, housing, human rights, health. And this polarisation is not the only polarisation that we're seeing. We're seeing increased extremism at all levels of our society, our culture and our communities. For anyone who finds the risk of natural systems and the life that we depend on collapsing over the next 100 years to be the most urgent and pressing challenge we face, I hear you and I share that concern. However, we cannot heal our relationship with the earth if we're too busy tearing each other apart. We need to heal our human systems of cooperation in order to facilitate the complex changes that we need to come into a regenerative relationship with country. We know our societal systems are failing because we're seeing decreasing levels of trust in government, hope for a better future, mental and emotional well-being, and willingness to listen to ideas from someone deemed as different. And there's a lot of research, Scanlon Social Cohesion Report, the Elderman Trust Barometer, that backs this up. Globally, over 40% of the world now lives under autocracy. And in the remaining democratic nations, democratic accountability, transparency, integrity, and the rule of law are on decline. Algorithmically driven polarisation has gotten to the point where more people look for their news from their social media feeds than from news organisations. Over 69% of people actively avoid the news, making their opinions ultimately shaped by the persuasive reactions of the people around them who still read the news, or at least claim to, when they saw what they read on the social media feed as news. As a result, we're facing a societal information crisis. The high levels of disinformation and misinformation are known to be a coordinated attack on our democracy by AI bots operated both domestically and internationally, as well as homegrown filter bubble caused disinformation. But this coordinated attack, their aim is to polarise and destabilise social democracies so they do not stand together to resist the agenda of authoritarian nationalist regimes. I think you know who we're talking about. The erosion of facts leads to an erosion of truth, which leads to an erosion of trust. Without trust, society cannot breathe. It cannot think, it cannot care, it cannot be clear-eyed and responsive to the challenges that it faces in the structures, leaders and institutions, in the systems that we live in. Over the last 15 years, the digital world has supercharged a crisis that's been brewing for decades, the loss of our collective voice. We've seen a sharp decline in everyday people participating in community organisations, faith organisations and unions. Civil society is supposed to be the immune system of our democracy, but that immune system has been compromised. It's been choked by red tape, extreme individualism and insidious creeping culture of elitist professionalism that has squeezed out citizens from many democratic grassroots organisations and has pushed towards centralisation and risk aversion that hacks locally led organisations to the bone. Too many non-profits operate like exclusive corporations, are held captive by short-term priorities of wealthy donors, and are often closed-shop democracies. The union movement, which could have a greater focus on empowering working people to cultivate cooperative ownership, has become a closed shop. Tangled in rigid laws, it often acts as a centralised bureaucracy that bottlenecks our connection to democracy rather than building it. The tragic result? We are left with a political culture and currently a federal government that seems perfectly happy to ignore the rot at the heart of our society and communities, like the algorithm, just as long as they keep winning elections. As a result of these conditions and the growing inequality, system dysfunction and pessimism they have created, we've seen a rise in angry, reactive, extremist politics that is increasingly punching down on minority groups as scapegoats, as a quick and simple direction to point the finger and the attention of the growing discontent of many in our community. We all know we have many complex problems, and complex problems require listening, dialogue and compromise, not three-word slogans, soundbites and rage-bait reels designed to funnel power towards the reactionary few, claiming a monopoly on the supposed simplistic and true solutions, distracting people from the real transformation that our system needs. Yes, there is a minority group who both intentionally and unintentionally have been influencing a lot of these problems and sabotaging our democracy with undue influence. They're called the billionaires. The group of people in our society increasingly motivated by greed, power and control. But although we need to create a society where wealth and power are more equal, singling them out is not the solution. We've sleepwalked into this mess of blame and hate. More blame and hate are not going to solve it. The situation is kind of like a river jammed with logs. Everyone is on their own log representing an issue or grievance, trying to jam it through, and no one is willing to take responsibility to get off their log, get some perspective on the whole situation from the view of the bank, and work together to widen the river. To widen the river means to widen the bandwidth and capacity of our democracy to deal with complexity and diversity of opinions. It means making more space for more people to have their say, ideally not strapped as a martyr on a log but swimming freely, able to connect and listen to others. To put it another way, our democracy was designed when we had horses and carts. Representatives made sense then. We now have all the information moving from anywhere to anywhere in the blink of an eye, alongside a society that's much more educated and much more diverse. The Roman Empire crashed partly because of the distance between its places was too great. Our modern world is at risk of crashing because of the distance between our hearts and minds, because of the failure to go into deep listening, dialogue and deliberation as a whole community. I believe now we need citizens to elect leaders, not as mere representatives and lone heroes, but as educators to help us build our skills of human connection, listening and empathy, discernment and accountability. This will allow us to build bridges between our growing diversity of hearts and minds, allowing for the polarity while building unity around universal human values. We need leaders who will champion the values of love and respect, fairness, equity, responsibility and accountability, transparency and integrity, community, belonging, trust in humanity and hospitality. We need leaders who are facilitators of dialogue, healthy deliberation, and most of all, opportunities for our whole community to participate in decision making on as much as possible, from budgets to laws. This will build trust, belonging and community while increasing accountability, integrity and transparency. It requires shearing back career politicians and removing vested interests from our democracy. We need leaders willing to rip off the glasses that extreme, cartelised and vested interest controlled political parties have glued to their heads. blurring their vision with rigid lenses of ideology and identity. We need leaders with the humility to trust the collective wisdom born from healthy discussion over their own personal views or the views of their chosen few. Just like when an intimate relationship hits the skids, a wise couple will seek counselling. They look for a mediating and facilitating person who can better see the dynamics of the relationship because they are outside the prism of its polarity. A counsellor helps people recognise how we often need to focus on the process of communication to shift the dynamic, break the cycle, mend the pattern, and help us reach better compromises and outcomes that move things forward. To help move us toward a culture of earth stewardship which allows humanity to last, because ultimately divine power will get sick of us, our hate and fighting, and flick us off the earth. We need to evolve our democracy to rise to the challenges of our time. This needs to come first, and every citizen and every politician, we all need to take responsibility for this together. Thank you very much.
Well, that's a